now we have Elaine Lewthwaite, who, along with Michelle Fox, put on a magnificent event. There's no words to describe how good this event was. Wow is probably the closest that comes to me. It was the Harvey Bay Seafood Festival, and it was a couple of weeks ago now. And in this video, you'll see some images. It's a slideshow of just how magnificent that event was. Many, many people. So, Elaine, after the events all finished up and finalized, how did you feel?
Absolutely exhausted. It's a huge event to put on. It takes, the best part of a year to organise. And once it comes the week of that seafood festival, it's frantic until the night. We pull it all down, and then we've got the biggest wash up in town. And it's very exhausting, but it's also very fulfilling.
I bet. Now, there was a lot of people. Is there an approximate figure?
Yes, there is, and you're certainly right. There was a lot of people. Our figures are sitting at about 9,000 for the day. We're slightly up on last year. Yeah, so we're pretty happy about that.
Yeah, well, the Minister Bill Byrne was there, and he certainly got to see exactly how many people love the Harvey Bay seafood. So hopefully he takes note.
Now, I think you'd have to be blind not to see that when there's 9,000 people in that park, they're there to eat fresh local seafood. So I think Minister Byrne probably got a very loud and strong message to say that seafood, the local seafood is very much in demand, no matter where you go on this coast, actually. So a very strong message. Don't have to sign a petition there. There's 9,000 people in the park saying it's our seafood and we want to eat it.
Definitely. So you had a great MC on the day, Darryl McPhee. How did he find the day, do you think?
Well, Daryl's a regular visitor to Harvey Bay, so he's sort of been along this journey with us for quite a while, from when we started in the very early days, where he left a whole heap of smelly fish in his car along the road for a couple of days. And Daryl's been on the journey with us, and he also thinks it's probably the biggest and the best festival that we've run so far. So he's very pleased with how we've grown.
Yeah, and I was at pretty well the front gate, and I certainly saw a lot of smiling faces. Even the kids, they were having a ball.
Yeah, lots of kids this year, which is really good because they're there with mum and dad, learning how to eat the seafood and enjoy the Harvey Bay lifestyle. And it was just a lovely place for families to be.
And importantly, they're learning where their seafood comes from.
Yeah, that's true. Like, the cooking demonstrations were packed all day, and with Professor McPhee there with the chefs, that whole story of local sustainable seafood with the science and how to cook it and eat it and enjoy it was there, and that just ran non-stop all day with only local seafood there.
And the music was fabulous.
Oh, well, we do try. We figure that you've got to have good music with a good party. And we try and have a variety too, because not everybody likes the same sort of music. So you win some, you lose some, but overall, yeah, it's pretty good.
So have you had any follow-ups, any feedback?
Oh yeah, we do. You get a lot of great feedbacks. You get a few smacks along the way. With an event that size, something always goes wrong, and we always have an autopsy later on, and do surveys. Surveys are very important, so that you aim to iron those glitches out for the following year. No matter how many years you've done it, you're always going to have something go wrong on the day, and whether it be a tap doesn't work or a gate doesn't work or something like that. It's but the feedback generally has been extremely good. The park being lovely and green and grassy, where people could just picnic on the grass, was probably one of the most rewarding things for people to be able to just sit back and kick back in a nice grassy area.
So Harvey Bay Seafood Festival 2018 organising begins.
Well, that probably happened on Sunday night after the festival. It always happens. Somebody says, well, next year we should do this or whatever. And next year's year 20, so we'll come up with something pretty special. So you better circle that date.
Yeah.
And make the trip north again and bring a few more southern fishermen with you.
Oh, I think all the people who watch this video better gear up for Harvey Bay Seafood Festival next year, because I'll tell you, it was amazing, best seafood, and it was a beautiful day. Well, thanks very much for your time, Elaine.
Okay, thank you.
See ya.
See you in August next year.
Yep, bye.
Bye.
So now we have Mary Howard, who is the Secretary of the Wild Caught Fishers Coalition in New South Wales, and also the New South Wales Director of Women's Industry Network Seafood Community, and also the recipient of the Women of the West Awards. How are you today, Mary?
I'm fine, Dane, as fine as I can be.
How are we travelling with this whole reform?
The aftermath, it's disappointing. It's shattering for some people, while others are rejoicing at their windfall wealth that they have made, to the demise of good, hard-working fishers who've been unsuccessful, fishers who won't know whether they're going to survive the process even after December. We have fishers who've had inactive endorsements who now have active endorsements because of the way that the department divvied up the shares into all fishers' hands and forced active fishers to try and buy their shares back. A lot of the fishers couldn't do this. We have fishers who couldn't afford to do it. We have fishers who have now got debt, fishers who are buying their jobs back, fishers who can't afford to buy their jobs back. Meanwhile, the government thinks this is a success. It's the democracy is out of the window.
The program that's been introduced, do you think they've had the necessary science to underpin this process, not to mention the science to underpin the future of how it all looks with quota management and your effort management?
I don't believe so. They have their vision, but they certainly don't have the science. And if the science in their vision is the removal of active fishers, then they've accomplished that. If the science was to activate inactive fishers, then they've accomplished that. What was the goal? This process will go on and on as fishers cannot survive with what they're left with, and they buy shares to try and get back to some substantial income that they had before this process was delivered.
Where are we up to with the fact that this $16 million that was used as a subsidy has now become taxable income at this point in time for the fishers that had to buy their jobs back and were subsidised by this package?
Desperate fishers waiting for a ruling that has been applied for at the behest of government and the Professional Fishermen's Association. So we wait for the ruling. In the meantime and in the interim, it's very clear from legal advice that there's some significant issues with where the government is going with the taxing situation. What is also worrying is that the government makes claim that they paid $1,000 for the fisher to research his own advice. Clearly, telling an industry that the subsidy is taxable, ask your financial advisor to advise you, would have been appropriate for government to do. And they knew. It's not as if they didn't know. they certainly have acknowledged that they knew, at least from the first round of trading, that the subsidy would be taxable. This process would have then made a lot of fishers very, very wary about what they bid, how they bid, and what they spent. There are fishers who've received subsidies exceeding 400,000. So let's figure on what the tax would be if that went on to that fisher's taxable income. It's considerable and very damning in terms of a government doing the right thing by its industry. At no time through this whole process has the government done the right thing by the commercial fishers of New South Wales. They've literally are screwing many of the fishers to the wall.
The government's claim is that this industry's left more secure. Is that the case?
It's no more secure, Dane, at the end of this than it was at the end of McDonald era, at the end of Obeid era, at the end of Carr era. Doesn't matter which minister you would like to name, going back at least 25 years, who had ensured the industry of security, ensured the industry of viability, and this stage that we're at today, there's no way the minister, unless there is some significant changes in the legislation, offers security for the fishermen that remain in the industry. Just takes one issue of conflict to be blown out of perspective by a group of recreational fishers, and they're on the bandwagon already. If the intent is to remove and reduce and restrict the commercial industry until it's next to being non-existent, then there's a notch in his belt.
The minister claims that there won't be a loss of access to fresh, locally caught seafood for the general public that actually own the resource. Do you see that as the case?
How the minister can argue that today's catch will be available tomorrow in terms of December on is in a world that is not reality.
Queensland is about to have this process jammed down their throats. Is there any advice you can give the Queensland fishers?
If they want support to oppose the process, they certainly have got it from New South Wales. We must, on the East Coast, unite. We must denounce this strategy as being the cruelest management regime that you could hand down to any industry. To have the audacity to give fishers shares in 2007 with the goal of security and being able to go out and earn your living, and then turn round under the same act, the 1994 Management Act, and literally divide the catch history across the industry and force each fisher to regain back what he has worked hard to develop it's just improper. It's wrong, and it does not come across to the industry as being fair and just. And those fishers who've made gains out of it, many of them that I have spoken to have said, we don't agree with the process, we've had to deal with it, we've come out of it okay, but just because we've had to deal with it and come out with it okay doesn't mean we support what it has done to our fellow fishers who've lost.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mary.
You're welcome.
We shall talk again.
I hope so.
All right, so now we have Eric Perez. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Queensland Seafood Industry Association. He was with us at the Harvey Bay Seafood Festival. So just to start with, Eric, how did you find the festival?
Oh, brilliant. Another chance to showcase seafood and see people support for fresh local seafood. So, no, it was really good. Always big pat on the back to those in the fishing community that put it together. Particularly Elaine Luthwaite up there and Michelle Fox and the Fox family who go out of their way to make sure that event is one of the key seafood showcase events in the state's event calendar. So it was good, mate. It was really good.
Do you want to give us some updates on where this reform process is up to?
Sure. So at the moment, there's been a public announcement that the working groups for the trawl, crab fisheries and the inshore fisheries working groups have been selected. There was a expression of interest process that lasted about a month. The selections were made by government, obviously, the department, those groups have been formed. So they have to meet to have their initial get-togethers and discussions on where to from here. And so we're in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment. Not much is happening other than to say the biggest thing I think that's going around at the moment is the push for VMS across the whole fleet. So at the moment, our trawl fisheries have got VMS and have had it for a long time. So now, according to their timelines, which is by this time next year, for a full implementation and rollout of VMS in the line, net, and crab fisheries up here.
That's a big expense for the fishermen.
Yeah, their argument is that they're trying to make the technology as small as they can, slightly smaller than an iPhone. I'm led to believe, and I've seen some of the tech that they're trialing at the moment. They may, depending on the cost, depending on how much they've got in their budget, it may not cost a lot initially for fishermen to get the units, but where the rubber will hit the road is that once these units are made compulsory, because that seems to be where the department is heading, that the ongoing monthly costs will have to be borne by the fishermen. So what that means practically on the ground for small scale fisheries, this I think will be a first in terms of implementing across the whole fleet. And I'm sure there'll be some heated discussions about this within each of the working groups as they progress. And there are mixed views on it. Some fishermen are very for it, some are very against it, some are sitting on the fence because it still hasn't been implemented yet. So all those teething problems are still to be experienced. We're at the moment, as in QSI has gone out to industry members and non-members asking their views on VMS, good, bad and ugly. So hopefully when we get some responses on that, we can go back to government or at least to the working groups and say this is what some of industry is saying for as they start to deliberate on what this will mean for us. So beyond that, mate, it's all quiet on the Western Front because we haven't heard a lot about what harvest strategies will look like until each of those groups work and what exactly that will mean. The government has made pretty clear that its preferred management tool is quota if there's no other option. So those discussions in each of those fisheries and what the harvest strategies will look like is yet to happen. So lots of unknowns yet.
The whole shift from the 40% unused biomass to the 60%, and yet the same document outlines that the science that is available at the moment that they've used to come up with the need for reform is limited at best. Does that concern QSIA as well?
Massively. We put it in our submission and it's still a concern that we've asked for more justification and explanation for why the target over 10 years is 60%, and all we can get is that would be us setting the future, or securing the future for our fisheries. But underlying all this is some massive assumptions about understanding what's actually being caught by each of the sectors, and knowing that to as fine a scale as we can get it. So my view of this is for where we have competing shared fisheries, so where there's a charter component and a component for the recreational sector and a component for us, what we catch is known through our logbooks, and add now VMS and potentially in the future things like third-party certification of our catch, which could mean cameras on boats. It's well known what we take. It's not so well known what the Recs take, despite the fact that government swear up and down, swear till they blue in the face that their boat survey, ramp surveys are a good scientific way to understand how much the recreational sector takes, which is a joke. And then tracking charter efforts. So how do you implement good fisheries management on that scale to hit this so-called 60% target when we're not 100% sure what 2 out of the 3 major groups are taking at any given time? And it's for charter and recreational, it seems to be a educated guesstimate, which is a concern for us, because for industry we're quite well monitored on that, in that regard. And the other one too for the listeners here is that 30 to 40% is deemed to be, in the literature that I've seen to this point, I'm happy to be corrected on this, is fairly conservative in terms of biomass, yet they're aiming for 60. So again, this was a question we asked in our submission and in media releases, is whose document is this fisheries reform thing? And it seems to me that maybe there's a conservation agenda in part of this to make sure we get to some of the most conservatively managed fisheries, not just in Queensland, but in Australia, maybe on the planet. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe the question the government has to be, and we've asked this in various forums, when will the reallocation process just stop? When can we get some guarantees that what we've got left is what we can keep fishing? And when will they commit to saying that or agreeing to the fact that we are food producers, recreational industry is just that. They have discretionary money that they use to ply a hobby, versus charter fishing, which is again discretionary expenditure, and what is more important for the long-term future of the state. The product is healthy. The product competes well in terms of carbon footprint with any other source of protein, yet we're still coming back in circles about this.
But anyway, thank you very much for coming on, Eric, and we'll have to get a weekly update from you, and hopefully we can get some common sense back into the argument.
No worries. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the next chat, mate.
Thanks, mate. Bye. All right, so we have Joseph Smythe. Now, Joseph runs a very successful Facebook page to do with fishing, and it's called Australian Professional Fishermen. And you can go and have a look at that on Facebook anytime you like. And Joseph is also the creative writer for Commercial Fishing Media. How are you today, Joseph?
Good, thanks, Dane. Thanks for that. How are you?
Yeah, very good. The answer's so simple, really, isn't it? It's not hard to actually share the resource. I mean, fishermen do it all the time. It's only this loud minority of the recreational sector that are having these impacts, and they tend to claim to represent these recreational fishers, and yet these recreational fishers have no idea who they are.
Exactly. The terminology they use all the time, resource sharing. There's always been resource sharing in Australia. commercial fishing interests have never sought to prevent recreational fishermen from fishing or targeting a certain species. Never attempted to legislate against recreational fishing interests. There's been nothing preventing recreational fishermen from going fishing ever, and indeed, recreational fishermen have often learnt a lot from commercial fishermen. On my blog, or on my Facebook page rather, I've received questions from recreational fishermen quite a lot for tips on sword fishing in particular. Catching swordfish has captured the imagination of the recreational fishing community recently. It's very difficult to target for recreational fishermen compared to commercial fishing. And commercial fishing has a track record of several decades of being able to catch them, knowing where they are. And a lot of recreational fishermen would like us to share our knowledge of sword fishing and how to catch them, which is fine. We don't mind at all. But happy to help.
So you monitor Facebook pages, not only Australian ones, but also international as well. This isn't just relevant to Australia. It's much broader, this whole campaign for nets out and recreational only, isn't it?
Yes. It's the interesting thing about it is it's largely restricted to the English-speaking world. So Australia, the United States, Canada, Britain, we all have these vocal, and New Zealand, not to forget, all have these vocal recreational lobby groups which are seeking to ban commercial fishing and take away the public's access to sustainable, clean, local seafood. In non-English speaking, many non-English speaking countries around the world, the recreational lobby has less influence. And there's a lot more appreciation from the public as a whole for the commercial fishing industry. Always when the press, when the media, the mainstream media interview and quote them, they use phrases like the recreational fishing industry is threatened by commercial overfishing. If we use the evidence of our eyes that's out there, it's not. There's more recreational fishing magazines, recreational fishing TV programs, internet pages, Facebook pages than ever before.
What do you think is going to happen when the public actually stands up and says, "Hang on a minute, if I own the resource, then why can't I access that resource through professional fishing?" Do you think the recreational lobbyists will even stand a chance?
I think the public is slowly starting to wake up now, purely because recreational fishing interests have achieved a number of successes for themselves lately, which have made the news, as well as the advent of social media, which has allowed commercial fishermen to connect with the public in a way they were never able to before. Recreational fishing interests, they have magazines, they have TV shows, they have internet sites, they have a whole media apparatus advancing their interests, which is funded by advertising. They always the phrase they use, resource sharing, is a tactic. Resource sharing gives the impression that the resource is not being shared between commercial and recreational fishing interests. And they always present this dichotomy. It's either commercial or recreational, and they never allow into the general discussion or argument the fact that commercial fishermen fish for the public, i.e. the majority of the public.
Yep.
Surveys have consistently shown that around the country, recreational fishermen represent at most, I think it's 24% of the West Australian fishing public. West Australian public goes recreationally fishing every year. If I recall correctly, Western Australia had the highest percentage of public which went recreationally fishing.
Yep.
So even in that case, the majority of the public still purchase their seafood.
Yeah.
But this is never allowed into the discussion.
Thanks for your time, Joseph.
All right, thank you very much, Dane.
We will look forward to your next blog.
Cool, thanks, Dane.
All right, see you, mate. Bye.
Yeah.